So I have a question for you, and it might be a question that you haven't thought of for a long time, or who knows. But if you could have one superpower, what would your superpower be? No one wants a superpower. All right, Laurie.
To heal people.
To heal people. All right. It's a good one. Anybody else?
To fly.
To fly. That's like the classic superpower, right? For those who aren't scared of heights. Like me.
Jason said super speed like Flash.
Super speed like Flash. That's awesome, yes. Sometimes when I'm late for a meeting, I would like to have super speed. Choir? Sing on key all the time? Not that you don't. I'm going to get in trouble. Last night at the 5 o'clock service, we had a young man over here who said that he wanted the power to be able to clean his room without having to do anything. For me, without a question, it would be invisibility. I am such a introvert sometimes. I just want to fade away. And so that sounds like fun to me. So this morning's epistle lesson is probably the most well-known piece of scripture in world history. If you've ever been to a wedding, you have heard 1 Corinthians 13. If we were able to count the number of times each of us has probably heard this passage in our lives, for some of us, it would number in the hundreds. And that's great, although sometimes familiarity goes, oh, I know what that's all about. I don't need to think about it that much. Paul begins his argument in 1 Corinthians 13 by imagining people having superpowers. He calls them spiritual gifts, but what we would call them is superpowers. And he imagines someone having the superpower of being able to speak and understand all languages, which would be pretty great. You could go anywhere in the world, and you could understand them, and you could speak to them. But he even adds, it's not just the languages of mortals, of humanity, but the language of the angels. You would even be able to communicate with the angels in their own language, whatever language that is. It would be a pretty neat superpower. He then talks about the superpower of prophecy, of being able to see the past, the present, and the future, and knowing what's going on in each of them. You wouldn't be surprised by anything, because you would know what was going on. He then talks about the superpower of having all knowledge, so you know everything that there is to know. You would be like a walking encyclopedia, Wikipedia, internet. You know everything that is known. But then he says you would then also have the ability to understand all mysteries, which are all the things that we don't know. So how does consciousness work? Well, we don't know, but you would know. How do you do the physics of the very small, quantum physics? How do you put that together with general relativity theory? We don't know, but you would know. And then he imagines the superpower of being able to move a mountain from one place to another. And then he tacks on a little bit towards the end the ability to bear all things and endure all things. If you are a superhero in the Marvel Cinematic Universe or the DC comic universe, and you had all of these powers, you were able to see all of time at once, you had all knowledge and all mysteries, you could speak all language, you could move a mountain, and you could endure anything, you would be the ultimate superhero. In fact, your comic book would be boring. Your movie would be boring because no one could touch you. right? No one could surprise you. No one could out-muscle you. No one could outthink you. And yet, when Paul speaks about these superpowers, these spiritual gifts, he says, if you have all of these, but you don't have love, it doesn't matter. You can do all this stuff and be the greatest superhero the world's ever known, but you don't have love. It counts for nothing. Who cares? For Paul, and this entire section of 1 Corinthians is about spiritual gifts. For Paul, love is the ultimate spiritual gift. Which I know makes us go, really? Wouldn't flying be better? Or invisibility? Like, maybe? No. Because love can actually change things. Love can actually do things. And I know it sounds fuzzy. The whole concept of love is fuzzy. Like what is love? It's hard. It's like trying to staple Jell-O to the wall. Like what is it? You sometimes know what it's like to feel it. You sometimes know what it's like to not feel it. But what is it? Well, Paul then anticipates that argument, which leads him into the next section of this chapter, where he defines love in 13 different ways, which is kind of helpful, right? So he says, love is patient. Love is kind. It is not envious or boastful or arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice in wrongdoing. It rejoices in the truth. Again, super familiar words to all of us, but when you hear them as sort of the checklist for what love is, it rings a little different maybe. Especially when you realize that when Paul defines love here, he names 3 things that it is and 8 things that it isn't, which is interesting. And again, I think that part of it is, I think oftentimes we experience where love is lacking much more quickly than we do when love is present. But it also goes back to what the purpose of 1 Corinthians, the entire book of 1 Corinthians and 2 Corinthians was all about. Paul was writing to a community that was in conflict, that was divided. As I said last week, it was divided among socioeconomic lines. It was divided among who was in charge, who had leadership roles, and who didn't. It was divided spiritually. Some people saying, well, I have this spiritual gift and you don't, and therefore I'm kind of better than you are, or God must like me more than you do. And you don't have to have lived in 50 AD to know that when you're in the midst of an argument, whether it's in your home or in your larger family or at work or at church or in the community or in the nation, the first things to go out the door are kindness and patience, right? First things out. The first things in the door are arrogance, rudeness, irritability, resentfulness, insisting on your own way. Paul is not pulling these terms just out of thin air. He's describing what's going on in Corinth. The divisions and the conflicts that they're experiencing, this is what they are seeing. Because it's what every couple, friendship, family, group, community that is engaged in an argument, in a fight, in conflict, experiences. And he's giving them a recipe for how to get out of it. By saying it doesn't matter if you're in leadership or you're not in leadership. If you don't have love, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you have this spiritual gift or that spiritual gift or no spiritual gift. If you don't have love, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you have lots of resources or you have no resources at all. If you don't have love, it doesn't matter. For Paul, love is the foundational spiritual gift upon which Anything else is counted as completely moot if you don't have love. And of course, we all know Paul didn't invent this. He's not just coming up with this stuff on his own, but love is the very foundation of Jesus' teaching ministry too. Over and over again, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. And then Jesus goes on to then explain who your neighbor is, which is everybody. And if you're still not sure that it's everybody, in the Gospel of Matthew, he then says, love your enemy. You don't have to like the person that you love. The person that you love doesn't have to like you. You still love them. And then on the night of his betrayal, the night before his crucifixion, he then tells his disciples that they are now to love one another as he loves them. The early part of his teaching ministry is about who to love. The last part of his teaching ministry is about how to love. And on the very next day, he shows them what that love is like by completely giving of himself on the cross. He'll say to them on the night of his betrayal, all people will know that you are my disciples if you have love for one another. Like the defining feature of the Christian life, the defining feature of the spiritual life is love. As Paul would say, if you don't have it, you have nothing. If you don't have it, we are a noisy gong and a clanging cymbal. And yet it's also, the whole love business is also hard. It's still sort of like trying to nail Jell-O to a wall because it is a part of our spiritual journey that we are never finished with. Other than Jesus, there has never been another human being that has walked this earth that has completely, every day, lived love. In fact, most of us routinely fall down by 8 o'clock in the morning, right? I know if Karen were here, I'm kind of glad she isn't this morning, but I know she's watching at home, and she's going, irritability? Rick? Irritability? You're preaching a sermon about irritability? You? Because when I get stressed, I immediately get irritable. The people I live with in my home, my ladies, they know when I am stressed. And Karen, after being married to me for 21 years, is now able to say, all right, Mary, what happened? Because they know that I can go to irritability very quickly. An interesting and, I think, helpful exercise would be to look at 1 Corinthians 13, not just as a general love poem, but to see it as a recipe for how we could love. And to look at these 11 traits that Paul gives us, and not judge other people on them. That's exactly what the people in Corinth were doing. And as soon as you start judging other people against this list, then all of a sudden you slip into arrogance and wanting things your own way. But to judge ourselves on them. Today, have I been patient? Today, have I been kind? Today, am I envious or boastful or arrogant or rude or irritable or resentful? And then tomorrow, have I been patient? Have I been kind? Have I been irritable, resentful? Our faith is not just about making ourselves slightly better people. Our faith is about making ourselves better people so that we might change the world. As Jesus said, people will know you're my followers if you have love for one another. Our love for one another. Our love for those around us. Our love even for our enemies is meant to be our defining feature and the agent by which we change the world. How did Jesus change the world? By loving it. By loving us. You may have heard the refrain in the early part of our worship service this morning, the opening hymn, "Give us peace in our time, give us peace in our time, give us peace in our time." The collect, the opening prayer assigned for the fourth Sunday after the Epiphany is, "O God, give us peace in our time." It comes from an old 7th century prayer that Episcopalians, Anglican Christians have preserved in our morning prayer for centuries. "Give us peace in our time, O Lord, for it is thou, Lord, only that makest us dwell in safety." It's a constant prayer, and we need it. And as war looms again on our world stage, we desperately want peace in our time, now, here. And the only way we get there is by love. By the nations of the world loving one another, but far more importantly, the people of the nations of the world loving one another. If every single 8 billion people on planet Earth woke up tomorrow morning and said, "Today I'm going to be patient. Today I'm going to be kind. Today I'm not going to be irritable. Today I'm not going to be resentful. Today I'm not going to insist on my own way." If 8 billion people did that, war would cease and there would be peace in our time. Flying would be cool. Being invisible would be cool. Being able to clean your room without doing anything would be cool. But none of those things will change the world. Only love will. And only if it starts with us.